I found 2 tickets to Europe in my husband's drawer for next week. Only 2 tickets. I checked the names and saw hers. I didn't cry, didn't yell. I just smiled and made one phone call to my lawyer. The morning he left for the airport, he opened his car and froze, because inside was, "Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching, get comfortable and relax, let's begin." My hand was in his sock drawer because I needed a charging cable. Marcus always left his cables tangled in there, claiming it was his mobile office. I pushed aside the folded black dress socks, the balled-up athletic ones, my fingers searching for the familiar rubberized cord. Instead, they brushed against something crisp and flat, tucked against the back of the drawer. Not fabric, paper. I pulled it out. It was a long, stiff envelope from a premium travel agency. My name was not on it. I opened the flap. Inside were 2 boarding passes already printed. First class. New York to Paris, Charles de Gaulle. The departure date was 1 week from today. The passenger names were listed side by side. Marcus Richardson, Chloe Abrams. The room did not spin. The floor did not fall away. I stood perfectly still, holding the papers. I read the names again. I noted the time of the flight, the seat numbers. I observed the quality of the paper, the sharp official font. I processed the information with a librarian's detached efficiency. Here was a primary source document. Here was evidence. I heard the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. I saw a dust mote suspended in a shaft of afternoon light crossing our bed. Our bed. I placed the tickets back into the envelope. I slid the envelope back into the exact position I had found it, nestled against the back of the drawer. I rearranged the socks over it, replicating their previous casual disorder. I closed the drawer. The soft click of the wooden runner was the only sound. I walked out of our bedroom and down the stairs. My movements were normal. I entered the kitchen. I filled the electric kettle with water and switched it on. I took a mug from the cupboard, the one that said "World's Okayest Librarian," a gift from my staff when I retired. I placed a tea bag inside. I watched the steam begin to rise from the kettle's spout. My mind was not occupied with questions of who Chloe was or how long this had been happening. Those questions were irrelevant. The fact was the fact. The document was the proof. My mind was occupied with logistics. He was leaving in 1 week. He had packed nothing yet. He had said nothing. This was a planned departure, a secret. The kettle boiled and clicked off. I poured the water over the tea bag. The brown cloud bloomed and swirled. I carried the mug to the small table in the breakfast nook and sat down. I looked out at our backyard. The azalea bushes I had planted 5 years ago were beginning to bud. The lawn needed its first mow of the season. For 25 years, I had built a life within these walls. I had curated it, organized it, maintained it. I had filed away disappointments, indexed small joys, cross-referenced anniversaries and birthdays and quiet Sunday mornings. I had been the archivist of our marriage. And now I had discovered a filed document that changed the entire catalog system. I felt a coldness settle in my chest. It was a clear, solid thing. It was not grief. Grief is hot and messy. This was the absence of heat. This was the clarity of a problem that required a solution. Marcus would be home from work at 6:15. He would hang his suit jacket in the hall closet, kiss my cheek, and ask about my day. He would tell me about a tedious meeting. He would do all of this while knowing about the tickets in the drawer. He would be practicing his performance. I had 7 days before his performance reached its finale in a Parisian airport. I sipped my tea. It was too hot. It scalded my tongue. The pain was sharp and clarifying. I would not cry. I would not scream. I would not confront him the moment he walked in. A confrontation would be a reaction. It would be emotional, chaotic. It would give him the upper hand, allowing him to explain, to lie, to turn the narrative. I was not interested in his narrative. I was interested in consequences. I finished the tea, the bitterness now muted. I washed the mug and placed it in the dish rack. I went to my small home office, the room that had been my planning space for library fundraisers and reading programs. I sat at the desk and turned on my laptop. I opened a search browser. My fingers were steady on the keys. I needed a lawyer, not just any lawyer. I needed one who specialized in divorce, yes, but more importantly, I needed one who understood strategy. I needed an ally, not just an advisor. Reviews pointed me to several names. One stood out, Diane Shaw. Her firm's website was clean, professional, no flashy promises. Her biography stated she had 30 years of experience in family law. A quote from an interview said, "I help clients secure their futures, not just win a case." That was the language I understood. Securing a future. It was a practical, architectural term. I wrote down the number. I looked at the clock. It was 4:30. There was time. I picked up my phone. I dialed the number. A receptionist answered. I asked to speak to Attorney Shaw. I was told she was with a client. I said, "Please tell her Evelyn Richardson called. My husband of 25 years has 2 first-class tickets to Paris for next week. I am not on them. I need to see her tomorrow." I left my number. I spoke each word slowly and clearly. My voice did not shake. I ended the call. I placed the phone on the desk. The coldness in my chest had crystallized into a plan. The first step was taken. I heard the garage door opener rumble, 6:15 on the dot. I closed my laptop. I stood up and smoothed my sweater. I walked to the kitchen. I heard the door from the garage open, his footsteps in the hall. "Evie, I'm home." His voice was normal, just a man coming home to his wife. I turned from the counter and offered a small smile, just a wife greeting her husband. "How was your day?" I asked. He hung his jacket in the closet. I turned back to the salad I was making, tearing lettuce leaves with more force than necessary. "Long day," he said, coming to stand near the island. He loosened his tie. "Traffic was a beast, you." "Quiet," I said. My voice was even. I did not look at him. The usual, some gardening, paid the bills. I could feel him watching me. Was I acting differently? I focused on the cucumber, slicing it into perfect, thin rounds. The rhythm of the knife on the cutting board was steady. "Something for dinner smells good," he said. "Just chicken," I replied. It was his favorite lemon herb recipe. The thought of making it now felt like a bizarre ritual, but rituals were important for maintaining a facade. I had spent a lifetime maintaining facades, the calm librarian, the supportive wife. This was just another performance. We ate at the kitchen table. He talked about a client meeting, a project deadline. I nodded in the right places, asked a vague question. My mind was not on his words. It was on the envelope in the drawer upstairs and the phone call I had made. I watched his face as he spoke. He seemed relaxed. There was no flicker of guilt in his eyes, no avoidance of my gaze. He was a confident liar. That fact solidified the coldness within me. This was not a momentary lapse. This was a planned deception, carried out with ease. My phone, face down on the counter, buzzed once. A notification. I did not check it. I waited until after dinner, after he had gone into the living room to watch the news, to look. It was an email from an assistant at Shaw and Associates. "Attorney Shaw could see me tomorrow at 10 in the morning. Please confirm." I typed a single word, "Confirmed." The next morning, I told Marcus I had a dentist appointment. He nodded, distracted, scrolling through news on his tablet. "Don't forget my suit needs to go to the cleaners," he said, without looking up. "I won't forget," I said. Shaw and Associates occupied a sleek, brickhand glass building downtown. The reception area was quiet, decorated in neutral tones. A water feature bubbled softly in one corner. There was no dust, no clutter. It was a space designed for order, for the systematic resolution of messy problems. I gave my name. I was shown directly into a corner office. Diane Shaw stood up from behind a large, tidy desk. She was a tall woman in her 60s, with short, sharp silver hair and glasses on a chain around her neck. She wore a well-cut navy suit. She did not smile warmly. She assessed me, her gaze quick and intelligent. She extended a hand. Her grip was firm. "Evelyn, please sit." I sat in a leather chair facing the desk. She resumed her seat, folding her hands on the blotter. There were no family photos, only a framed degree, a few awards, a neat stack of files. "Your message was succinct," she began. "I find clarity saves time," I said. "Tell me the situation, in your own words." I told her. I stated the facts as I had cataloged them. 25 years of marriage, the discovery of the tickets yesterday afternoon. The names, the date, the destination, his subsequent normal behavior. I did not cry. My voice remained a flat, calm recitation. I presented myself as a piece of evidence. She listened without interruption, her eyes fixed on me. When I finished, she leaned back slightly. "What is your desired outcome, Evelyn?" That was the correct question. It was not, "How do you feel?" It was, "What do you want?" "I want a divorce," I said. "I want an equitable division of assets. I want the house. I want the process to begin on my terms at a time of my choosing and not a moment before. I do not want him to have the opportunity to hide assets or manipulate the narrative. I want his departure, which he has already planned, to proceed. But I want him to know, the moment he believes he has succeeded, that I have been ahead of him the entire time." A faint, approving glint showed in her eyes. It was not warmth, but professional recognition. A strategic reveal. "You want consequences, not just a settlement." "I want the settlement to be the consequence," I clarified. "The legal and financial consequence of his actions. The personal consequence is the knowledge that he was never in control." She gave a single, slow nod. "All right. Then we have 2 weeks of work to do. His flight is in 7 days. We will use that time. Step 1 is a complete and immediate financial audit. We need to secure a snapshot of all marital assets before he has any idea the marriage is ending. Do you have access to all accounts?" "I believe so. We have joint checking, savings, investment accounts, 2 credit cards. The mortgage is in both names." "Gather every statement you can find for the last 2 years. Online login credentials for everything. Tax returns. We need to see cash flow. We are looking for unusual withdrawals, transfers, purchases. Things that might indicate hidden accounts or funds being diverted to support this other relationship." I had already thought of this. "I can do that." "Good. I will have my paralegal draft a petition for divorce. We will file it at the appropriate time. We will also draft a proposed settlement agreement based on the financial picture we assemble. We will be ready." She paused. "The timing of the service of the papers is crucial. You have an idea?" "I do," I said. I told her my idea. The airport, the moment of anticipation. She listened, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she was silent for a moment. "It's theatrical," she said finally, "but legally sound provided the financial groundwork is solid. It sends a clear message. He will be served in a public place at the pinnacle of his deceit. He will have no time to react before the legal process is upon him." She tapped a finger on the desk. "I will need to engage a process server who can operate discreetly at the airport. That can be arranged." "And the item?" I asked. "The personal message?" "That is your domain," she said. "Keep it factual. Do not make any threats. A simple, undeniable statement of your knowledge. The legal papers will do the talking. The personal item should simply be the period at the end of the sentence." I understood. She was drawing a line between the legal strategy and the personal justice. She would handle the former. The latter was mine to execute. We spent the next hour discussing details. Retainer agreements, document lists, timelines. I wrote notes in a small notebook I had brought. When the meeting concluded, she walked me to the door. "You are handling this with remarkable composure, Evelyn," she said. It was an observation, not a compliment. "There will be time to fall apart later," I said. "Now is the time to build a wall." A slight, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. "Call my direct line if you need anything. Start gathering those documents tonight." I drove home. The dentist appointment excuse had given me a 2-hour window. I stopped at the library, my old workplace, and used a public computer to print out several months of statements from our online banking portal. I felt no nostalgia being there. The space was just a tool. When I returned home, the house was empty. Marcus was at work. I went to our shared home office. I opened the filing cabinet. I began removing folders, creating orderly stacks on the desk: bank statements, investment reports, credit card bills, property tax records. I worked methodically, the way I used to process new book acquisitions. Each document was a piece of data. Each number told a part of the story of our life, and now of its unraveling. I found the first anomaly within an hour. A series of withdrawals from our joint savings account, each for $500 over the past 4 months. They were listed as ATM transactions, Marcus never used ATMs. He used his credit card for everything. I noted the dates and amounts. This was the paper trail. This was the fuel for his fantasy. I placed the evidence in a new folder. I labeled it with a date and a question mark. Then I returned everything else to its place, exactly as I had found it. The office showed no sign of my audit. The house was silent. The wall was beginning to take shape, brick by brick, paper by paper. The folder with the ATM withdrawals sat on my desk, a quiet accusation. It was only the first piece. A thorough audit required examining every line item, every transaction, across every account. That became my work for the next several nights. Marcus's routine was predictable. He arrived home, we ate dinner, he watched television or read in his study, and he went to bed by 10:30. I waited for the sound of his steady breathing from the bedroom upstairs. Then I would return to the home office, close the door, and turn on the desk lamp. The blue light of the computer screen became my sun. I logged into our joint banking portal, our investment accounts, our credit card websites. I opened spreadsheets on my laptop, creating columns for dates, amounts, vendors, and notes. The ATM withdrawals were the most blatant, but they were not the only evidence. On our shared credit card statement, I found charges I did not recognize. A boutique hotel in the city, 50 miles away, on a night he had told me he was working late at the office for a client dinner. A charge from a florist that was not our usual one, for a delivery to an address I did not know. A dinner at an expensive restaurant I had never heard of. Each charge was a data point. I cross-referenced them with his calendar on the shared family app. Work dinner, team building, client entertainment. The lies were documented in two places, his calendar and our bank statement. I printed every statement. I highlighted the questionable items in yellow. I made copies of everything, storing the originals back in the filing cabinet with precise care and keeping the annotated copies in a new, expanding folder. This was my evidence file. It was not about emotion, it was about documentation. I emailed Diane Shaw updates every other day. Short, factual reports. Found 4 additional ATM withdrawals, total $2,000 over 4 months. Have flagged corresponding credit card charges for hotels and dining on dates he claimed to be working. Attached scanned copies for your file. Her replies were equally brief. Received. This establishes a pattern of using marital funds for personal indiscretion. Continue. We are drafting the petition. One evening, while Marcus was watching a basketball game, the volume turned up. I ventured into his study. It was a space I rarely entered, his domain of leather chairs and sports memorabilia. I was looking for paperwork related to his bonus from last year. He had mentioned it was less than expected, and I had accepted that without question. Now, every financial statement required verification. I did not rummage. I looked with purpose. In the top drawer of his desk, under a stack of old golf scorecards, I found a folded bank statement from a different institution. It was not one of our joint accounts. The account was in his name only. It had been opened 8 months ago. The statement showed a direct deposit from his employer, his bonus, in full, followed by a series of transfers out to another account whose number was partially obscured. The ending balance was minimal. I stood in the quiet study, the sound of the game a dull roar from the living room. This was the discovery I had been preparing for, yet seeing the paper in my hands made the coldness inside me solidify into something harder. He had not just spent marital money on his affair. He had actively diverted funds, hiding them. This was premeditated financial separation. He was building a lifeboat with our shared resources, and he intended to leave me on the sinking ship. I took the statement to the small photocopier in the corner of the room. The machine whirred softly. I made a copy. I returned the original to its exact place under the golf scorecards. I smoothed the papers. I left the study, the copy folded neatly in my hand. Upstairs in the office, I added this new document to the file. It was the cornerstone, hiding assets. Diane's next email confirmed it. This changes the landscape significantly, Evelyn. This demonstrates intentional dissipation of marital assets. The court will not look favorably on this. This strengthens your position for the settlement immensely. Do you have online access to this separate account? I did not, but but I had the account number and the routing number from the statement. That was enough for Diane's team to subpoena records later. My job was to prove the account existed and that funds had flowed through it. I had done that. The audit was nearly complete. I had a comprehensive picture: the steady drip of cash withdrawals, the secret dinners and hotels, the hidden account. The story it told was mundane in its deceit. There was no grand romance, only a series of transactions, of stolen moments and pilfered funds. It was a tawdry spreadsheet betrayal. The night before I was to deliver the full file to Diane, I sat at the desk late. The house was silent. I had compiled a summary spreadsheet, a timeline of the financial deception. I looked at the dates. The secret account was opened 8 months ago. The first hotel charge was 6 months ago. The ATM withdrawals began 4 months ago. The Paris tickets were for next week. It was a progression, a man moving step by logical step toward an exit he thought he controlled. I thought of the younger man I had married. He had been ambitious, charming in a scattered way. I had provided the order, the stability. I had managed our lives so he could focus on his career. I had been the filing system for our shared existence. And now he had filed me away as obsolete. I did not feel sadness in that moment. I felt a profound sense of waste, not of my years, but of his integrity. The man I had built a life with had chosen to become small and dishonest. I closed the laptop. I placed the master file, a thick stack of papers now, into my sturdy tote bag to take to Diane's office in the morning. The audit was finished. The evidence was gathered. The wall was built. All that remained was for Marcus to walk into it. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. As I stood at the sink, I saw the reflection of the room in the dark window. I looked like a woman in her own home, which I was. But I was also a warden guarding the secret of the trap I had laid. The performance would need to continue more carefully than ever. The next phase required not investigation, but acting. I had to look like the woman he believed me to be, unaware, trusting, settled. I took a sip of water. The performance would start tomorrow at breakfast. The thick folder of evidence felt like a weight in my tote bag, but it was a weight of my own making. I delivered it to Diane Shaw's office the next morning. We reviewed the summary spreadsheet together in silence. "This is excellent work," she said finally, closing the folder. "Thorough, methodical. It paints a very clear picture for a judge. The hidden account is the key. He'll have to explain that." "When will the papers be ready?" I asked. "The petition and the proposed settlement agreement will be drafted by Friday. My paralegal is already on it. We will file the petition with the court on the morning of his departure. The process server will have the documents ready for the airport. The timing is precise." "Good," I said. "Now," she said, leaning forward, "the most difficult part begins. You must go home and behave as if nothing has changed. Your demeanor is critical. If he suspects anything, he could move funds, cancel the trip, or attempt to preempt you legally. Your normalcy is your weapon. Wield it carefully." I understood. I had been preparing for this. The audit was a silent, solitary task. This was a performance for an audience of one. I drove home. I stopped at the grocery store. I bought the ingredients for the lemon herb chicken again, and for a chocolate tart he liked. Domestic gestures were now strategic moves. When I walked into the house, I arranged my face into its familiar, placid expression. Marcus was home early, which was unusual. He was in the living room looking at his phone. He looked up, a slight tension around his eyes. "Oh, you're back. How was the dentist?" "Fine, a cleaning, no cavities." I placed the grocery bags on the kitchen counter. "You're home early." "Yeah, wrapped up a few things. Big week next week. I have that conference in Chicago." The lie was so smooth. It was not Chicago, it was Paris. I began unpacking the groceries. "Oh, that's right, the tech conference. What day do you leave again?" "Monday morning, back Thursday evening." "I'll put it on the calendar," I said, my voice mild. I placed chicken breasts in the refrigerator. "Will it be busy?" "Probably, lots of meetings, networking dinners, the usual." He put his phone down and came to lean against the kitchen doorway. He watched me. I could feel his scrutiny. Was he looking for signs? I turned and gave him a small, preoccupied smile. "You should take your good suit, the navy one. It needs to be cleaned. I can drop it off tomorrow. He seemed to relax slightly. My concern for his suit was a language he understood. It was the language of a wife who was managing his life. Thanks, Evie. That would be great. Dinner that night was a masterclass in subtext. We sat at the table. I served the chicken, the roasted potatoes, the green beans. The clink of our cutlery against the plates was the only sound for a moment. "This is delicious," he said. "Thank you." I took a sip of water. "So, this conference, is it at the same hotel as last year?" He chewed slowly. No, a different one, the Grand Horizon." I nodded as if filing the information away. "I hope the rooms are nice. You always complain about the pillows at those places." He chuckled, a forced sound. "I'll survive, it's just a few nights." Just a few nights in Paris with Chloe, I thought. The coldness inside me was a steady presence. I smiled again. "Well, pack an extra pillowcase from home. It helps." The conversation moved to other things. The neighbors, a movie he wanted to see, a leaky faucet in the guest bathroom. I participated, I nodded, I made appropriate comments. All the while, I observed him. I saw the way his eyes flicked to his phone when it buzzed. I saw the slight restlessness in his hands. He was a man counting down the days, living a double life. He thought the biggest challenge was keeping his secret. He did not know the secret was already mine. Later, as we got ready for bed, he stood in his walk-in closet. "I should probably start pulling some things together for the trip this weekend," he said, more to himself than to me. "Do you want me to help?" I asked from the bathroom, brushing my teeth. The question was a test. No, I can manage. It's just business casual stuff. Don't worry about it." Of course not, asterisk, I thought. "You wouldn't want me to see you packing for a romantic getaway." I spat out the toothpaste. "Okay, just let me know if you need anything ironed." The performance extended through the week. I asked about the conference agenda. I reminded him to charge his travel adapters. I acted the part of the supportive, slightly boring wife, entrenched in the mundane details of his life. He, in turn, acted the part of the slightly distracted, work-focused husband. We were two actors in a play that was about to have a catastrophic final act, and only I had read the revised script. The tension was not in loud arguments or slammed doors. It was in the quiet spaces. It was in the way he would sometimes stop talking mid-sentence, as if remembering a lie he had to maintain. It was in the way I would catch him looking at me when he thought I was distracted, his expression unreadable. Was it guilt? Or was it just impatience for the week to be over? I continued my routines. I worked in the garden. I met a former colleague for lunch. I went to the library. My life had the appearance of its usual calm rhythm, but every action, every word spoken to him was deliberate. I was building the scaffold of normalcy so that when it collapsed, the fall would be entirely his. By Friday, the facade was solid. When he left for work, he gave me a casual peck on the cheek. "Have a good day," he said. "You too," I replied. "Don't work too hard." I closed the door and leaned against it. The house was empty. The performance was exhausting, but it was almost over. The weekend was here. He would pack. He would tell more lies, and I would continue to help him right up until the moment I destroyed him. Normalcy was indeed the weapon, and I had sharpened it to a fine point. I stood against the door until I heard his car pull out of the driveway. Then I moved. The performance was over for the moment. Now came the practical, physical preparations. Diane had said the personal message was my domain. I had known from the beginning what it would be. First, I needed access to his car. He always kept his keys on a hook in the mudroom. I went there now. The key ring held his car key, the house key, and a small metal fob from his gym. I carefully unhooked it. The car key was distinctive, a black plastic head with the manufacturer's logo. I took a clear piece of packing tape and pressed the key firmly onto it, capturing a sharp impression of both sides. I then returned the key ring to its hook, making sure it hung at the same angle as before. I drove to a large hardware store on the other side of town. I bought a blank key for that make of car. I went to the key copying machine in the back. My hands were steady as I inserted the blank and lined up my tape impression under the scanner's camera. The machine whirred, cutting the metal. 2 minutes later, I had a functional spare key. I paid in cash. I dropped the tape into a trash can in the parking lot. Back home, I went to the attic. It was a space I rarely visited, filled with labeled boxes of Christmas decorations, old textbooks, and memorabilia. I knew exactly which box I needed. It was marked Photos Early Years. I carried it down to the home office. Inside, nestled among envelopes of faded prints, I found the one I was looking for. It was a 5x7 photograph in a simple silver frame. It showed a much younger Marcus and me on our wedding day. We were standing on the steps of the courthouse, not a grand affair. He was wearing a suit that was slightly too big. I was in a simple cream-colored dress. We were both smiling, his arm around my waist, my head tilted toward his shoulder. The hope in our eyes was almost painful to look at now. It was a hope I had curated, preserved. Now I would repurpose it. I removed the photo from its frame. On the back, in my own handwriting from 25 years ago, it said, E and M, the beginning. I left that. I took the photo to the small scanner copier in the office. I made a clean, color copy of just the photograph. I then placed the original back in its frame and returned it to the box. The copy was what I needed. At my desk, I took a sheet of my personal stationery, a heavy cream-colored paper. I selected a black pen. I wrote in my most precise and elegant handwriting the 2 words Diane and I had agreed upon, Bon Voyage. Below that, on the next line, I wrote, The lawyer has the rest. I did not sign it. The handwriting was signature enough. I trimmed the note so it was a neat rectangle. I trimmed the photocopied picture to the same width. Using clear tape, I fastened the note to the back of the picture, so the words would face out when the picture was placed face up. The message was now a single, 2-layered item, our hopeful past on one side, my cold present knowledge on the other. My phone buzzed. It was Diane. The papers are ready, she said without preamble. The petition and the proposed settlement. They will be filed electronically with the court first thing Monday morning. The process server has his instructions and his photograph. He will be at the airport short-term parking, level 3, near the elevators. He will confirm the vehicle and serve him once he approaches the car. The timing is synchronized. Good, I said. The personal item is prepared. Describe it. A photocopy of our wedding photo. A 2-word note taped to the back. Nothing threatening, just a statement of fact. There was a pause on the line. That is efficient. It will have impact. Where will you place it? On the driver's seat. He will see it the moment he opens the door to get his luggage. And you have the key. Yes. The forecast for Monday morning is clear. No precipitation. What is your window? He plans to leave for the airport around 9 a.m. I will execute between 5 and 5:30 a.m. There will be no one around. I will be back inside before he wakes up. You have thought of everything, Evelyn. I have had time to think, I replied. After the call, I found a small, plain cardboard box, the kind that might hold stationery. I placed the photo and note inside. I added the spare car key. The box was not for concealment, but for organization. It represented a task to be completed. I placed it on my desk. The legal machinery was primed. The personal rebuke was prepared. The physical means of access was secured. All the components were lined up, waiting for the final act of placement. This phase of the plan was characterized by quiet, deliberate assembly. It felt no different from planning a library event. Identify the goal, gather the resources, establish the sequence of actions. That evening, Marcus was distracted, his mind clearly already on his journey. He packed a small carry-on suitcase with meticulous care, choosing shirts I had ironed. Packing light, I asked, standing in the doorway of his closet. Just for a few days. Don't want to check a bag if I can avoid it. He didn't look at me. Smart, I said. Less to lug through the airport. He zipped the suitcase closed. All set. I nodded. I'll make a good breakfast before you go on Monday. You don't have to do that. I want to, I said. It was the truth. I wanted him to have a final moment of false comfort, a last taste of the domesticity he was so eager to abandon. I wanted that memory to sour in his mouth later. The box sat on my desk, a silent promise. The key inside was cold metal. The photo was a ghost. The note was a period. Everything was ready. The next move was mine, and it would happen in the dark, quiet hours before dawn. Sunday evening settled over the house with a heavy quiet. The performance of normalcy was in its final hours. I cooked a simple pasta dinner. We ate in the living room, watching a nature documentary he had selected. The images of distant landscapes flickered across the screen, a cruel parody of his imminent travel. He seemed relaxed, almost buoyant. The tension I had seen earlier in the week had evaporated, replaced by the anticipation of a man on the eve of liberation. After the dishes were done, he went upstairs. I followed a few minutes later. When I entered our bedroom, he had done it. He had laid his open suitcase on the bed. Our bed. The crisp, dark fabric of the luggage was a stark intrusion on the familiar floral duvet cover. He was moving between the closet and the suitcase, placing folded items inside with careful deliberation. He saw me in the doorway and paused, a pair of charcoal gray trousers in his hands. "Just getting a head start," he said, a little too casually. "Of course," I said. I walked into the room and sat on the small, upholstered bench at the foot of the bed. I watched him. "It looks like you're packing more than just business casual." He glanced down at the suitcase. "Well, there might be a nicer dinner or two, client entertaining." "I see." I kept my voice light, conversational. "Did you remember your passport?" He froze for a fraction of a second. A domestic trip to Chicago did not require a passport. "It's in my briefcase," he said smoothly, recovering. "Just in case. Company policy for international clients sometimes, you never know." "Better safe than sorry," I agreed. He continued packing. Silk ties, a French cuff shirt with his gold cufflinks, the ones I had given him for our 20th anniversary. Each item was a clue he was too arrogant to realize he was leaving. He held up a deep blue shirt, one that brought out the color of his eyes. A small wrinkle marred the collar. "This one needs a touch-up," he muttered, more to himself. "Here," I said, standing up. "Let me." I held out my hands. He hesitated, then passed me the shirt. Our fingers did not touch. I took it to the ironing board set up in the corner of the room. I plugged in the iron. I waited for it to heat, the silence broken only by the hiss of steam. I spread the shirt on the board, smoothing the fabric with my palms. I applied the iron, moving it in slow, precise strokes. The smell of hot cotton and steam filled the air. It was a scent from 1,000 previous mornings, a scent of domestic care. I was ironing the shirt my husband would wear to run away with another woman. The absurdity of it was so profound it felt clinical. There was no rage in the motion, only a cold focus. This was the last service I would ever perform for him. I wanted it to be perfect. When the shirt was smooth, I carried it back to the bed. I folded it neatly, as I had done for 25 years, and placed it in the suitcase. It lay atop his other lies, a pristine blue square. "Thanks, Evie," he said. He didn't look at me. He was checking his watch. "You're welcome." I resumed my seat on the bench. "What time is your flight again?" 10:15. I should leave here by 9 to be safe with security. "I'll set the alarm," I said. He zipped the suitcase closed. The sound was final. He lifted it off the bed and set it upright near the bedroom door. The space where it had lain looked empty, the duvet cover slightly compressed. He turned back to the room, to me. He seemed to really look at me then, perhaps for the first time in days. "You'll be okay here?" he asked. The question was perfunctory, a line from the script of a dutiful husband. "I'll be fine," I said. "I have the garden club Tuesday, and I might finally start sorting through the attic boxes." He nodded, a look of vague approval crossing his face. The attic boxes were a symbol of my manageable, small life. "That's a good project. Well," he stretched. "I think I'll turn in. Big day tomorrow." "Sleep well," I said. We got ready for bed with the routines of a long-shared life. Brushing teeth, washing faces, turning down the covers. He climbed into his side. I climbed into mine. The distance between us and the king-sized bed felt continental. He turned out his bedside lamp. "Good night, Evelyn." "Good night, Marcus." The room was dark. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling. I listened to his breathing. It slowed and deepened into sleep far sooner than mine. He was untroubled, a man whose plans were laid, his suitcase packed, his future waiting on a tarmac. He was dreaming of Paris. I did not sleep. I monitored the slow passage of time by the faint red glow of the digital clock. I thought of the box on my desk downstairs. I thought of the spare key. I thought of the photo, the two young faces filled with a hope that had now curdled into this silent, dark betrayal. The grief I had not allowed myself to feel threatened to rise in my throat, but I swallowed it down. This was not the time for grief. Grief was for afterward. Now was the time for execution. Beside me, he sighed in his sleep, a sound of perfect contentment. The sound cemented my resolve. When the clock read 4 in the morning, I would get up. The last night was over. The final day had begun. The red numbers on the clock flipped to 4:00 a.m. The house was a vault of silence. Marcus's breathing beside me was deep and even. I moved with the careful precision of a surgeon. I slid out from under the covers, my feet finding the rug without a sound. I did not turn on any lights. The faint glow from the digital clock and the moonlight through the blinds were enough. I was already dressed in dark joggers and a black sweatshirt, laid out the night before. I slipped my feet into quiet sneakers. I walked to the door, opened it slowly to avoid any creak, and stepped into the hallway. I closed the door with a soft click. Downstairs, the air was cooler. I went directly to the home office. The plain cardboard box was on my desk where I had left it. I opened it. Inside, the spare car key felt cold. The photocopied picture with its taped note was face down. I picked up both items. I did not hesitate. This was not a moment for doubt, it was a moment for action. I moved through the dark kitchen to the mudroom. I unlocked the deadbolt, turned the knob, and stepped outside. The pre-dawn air had a sharp chill. The sky was a deep indigo, just beginning to lighten at the edges. The neighborhood was perfectly still. Not a single light shone in any other house. The world was asleep. His car, a silver sedan, was parked in the driveway. The streetlights cast long, faint shadows. I walked to the driver's side door. My heartbeat was steady, my hands dry. This was the physical point of no return. Up until now, everything had been planning and preparation. This was the deployment. I inserted the spare key into the door lock. It turned smoothly, with a solid asterisk clunk asterisk. The sound was loud in the silent morning. I opened the door. The interior dome light came on, a warm yellow glow that felt shockingly public. I quickly reached in and pressed the button on the dashboard to disable it for future openings. The light went out. I stood there for a moment, looking at the driver's seat. It was adjusted to his height and lean. A travel coffee mug sat in the cup holder. The familiar scent of his car, leather cleaner, and a hint of his cologne wafted out. This was his space, his capsule for escape. I took the photocopied picture. I placed it squarely on the center of the driver's seat, face up. Our younger selves smiled hopefully toward the steering wheel. The note on the back, with my handwriting, was hidden from view but present. It was a simple, stark placement. He would see it the instant he opened the door to retrieve his luggage from the backseat. There was no missing it. I did not linger. I closed the car door. I locked it with the key. I tested the handle to ensure it was secure. Then I turned and walked back to the house. My footsteps were quiet on the pavement. I re-entered the mudroom, locked the door behind me, and reset the deadbolt. I returned to the office. I placed the spare key back in the box. I would dispose of it later. For now, I put the box in a desk drawer. The task was complete. The trap was baited and set. I went to the kitchen. I filled the electric kettle and turned it on. While it heated, I stood at the window overlooking the driveway. His car sat there, innocent in the dim light. Inside, on the seat, was the seed of his unraveling. I felt a strange, cold calm. There was no exhilaration, only the satisfaction of a complex task executed correctly. My phone, set to silent, vibrated in my pocket. It was a text from Diane Shaw. Petition filed with court at 4:30 a.m. as planned. Process server is en route to airport position. Confirm deployment. I typed back. Deployment confirmed at 4:17 a.m. Item is in position. Her reply was immediate. Then it's done. The sequence is in motion. Do not answer his calls later. I understand. I made a cup of tea. I sat at the kitchen table in the dark and drank it. I watched the sky slowly shift from indigo to a soft gray. The familiar contours of our backyard emerged from the shadows. The azalea bushes, the bird feeder, the fence. This was my world. In a few hours, he would leave it, believing he was stepping into a new one. He had no idea he was walking directly into the consequences I had engineered. The first bird began to chirp, then another. The world was waking up. I finished my tea. I rinsed the mug and placed it in the dishwasher. I went upstairs. The bedroom was still dark. Marcus was still asleep. I took off my sneakers and sweatshirt. I slid back into bed, the sheets cool. My body lay beside his, the last time we would share this space. The gulf between us was now absolute, and he was oblivious to it. I closed my eyes. I did not sleep. I waited for the alarm to sound, for the final act of our morning routine to begin. My part was over. Now I just had to watch him leave. The alarm buzzed at 7. Marcus stirred immediately, reaching over to silence it. He sat up, a man energized by purpose. I moved more slowly, as if roused from a deep sleep. "Morning," he said, swinging his legs out of bed. "Morning," I replied, my voice thick with feigned drowsiness. "I'll start breakfast." I went downstairs while he showered. I moved through the kitchen with a deliberate, familiar rhythm. I ground coffee beans. I whisked eggs. I toasted bread. The ordinary sounds, the grinders were, the sizzle of butter in the pan, were a shield. I set 2 places at the kitchen island. He came down dressed in the clothes he had laid out, the trousers, the blue shirt I had ironed. He looked rested, confident. He poured himself a cup of coffee. "Smells good," he said. "It's just scrambled eggs and toast." We sat. He ate quickly, checking his phone between bites. I ate slowly, watching him. "You seem eager to get going," I said. "Just want to beat the traffic. Security lines can be unpredictable." He took a last sip of coffee and stood. "I should hit the road." I stood as well. "I'll walk you out." He picked up his suitcase from by the front door. He hesitated, then turned to me. There was a moment where the script seemed to falter. He leaned in and gave me a quick, dry peck on the cheek. It was the kiss of habit, devoid of warmth. "Take care, Evie." "You too," I said. "Have a good trip." He nodded, turned, and opened the front door. Sunlight streamed in. He wheeled his suitcase down the path to the driveway. He did not look back. He opened the trunk, hefted the suitcase inside, and closed it with a solid thud. He walked to the driver's side door, my breath caught not from anxiety but from anticipation. This was the moment before the trigger was pulled. He opened the car door. He did not look down at the seat. He simply got in as he had done thousands of times. The door closed. I saw his profile through the windshield as he started the engine. He adjusted the mirror. He backed out of the driveway smoothly. He gave a brief, absent wave without looking at the house and drove away down the street. I stood in the open doorway until his car turned the corner and disappeared. Then I closed the door. The click of the lock echoed in the sudden quiet. The house was empty. It was mine. The silence was not peaceful, it was charged. It was the silence after the detonation, before the dust settles. I walked back into the kitchen. Our breakfast plates were on the island, his plate nearly clean, mine half full. The coffee pot was still warm. I looked at this evidence of our last shared meal. Then I moved. I did not wash the dishes. I left them there. I went upstairs to our bedroom. The bed was unmade, his side disheveled. I stripped the sheets, the duvet cover, the pillowcases. I carried the bundle down to the laundry room and shoved it into the washing machine. I added detergent and turned it on. The drum began to churn. I returned to the bedroom. I opened the windows wide, letting the cool morning air flush out the stale, sleeping scent. I went to his closet. I did not touch his clothes. I simply opened the doors and left them open. I vacuumed the entire house. I moved furniture to get into corners. The roar of the vacuum cleaner was a satisfying noise that filled the silence. I dusted every surface, wiping away a week's worth of inattention. I scrubbed the kitchen counters, the stovetop, the sink. I mopped the floors. This was not mere cleaning. It was a physical purge. With every swipe of the cloth, every push of the mop, I was erasing the traces of his daily presence, of the performance I had been forced to maintain. The energy that had been coiled inside me for 2 weeks, the cold, calculated energy, was now being converted into motion. There was a furious, focused joy in it. I cleaned out the refrigerator, discarding expired condiments, a half-eaten container of takeout that was his. I took the trash bags out to the bin. By early afternoon, the house gleamed. It was spotless, airy, and quiet. The laundry was done. I remade the bed with fresh, clean sheets. I stood in the center of the living room. The sun now slanted through the windows at a different angle. The space felt different. It was no longer our asterisk house. It was my house. He had left it, and in leaving, he had ceded it. The adrenaline began to ebb. I made a new pot of coffee, a single serving. I took my mug and sat at the kitchen table, the same place I had sat after finding the tickets. I watched the backyard. The bird feeder was busy. A squirrel chased another along the fence. My phone sat silent on the table. Diane's instruction was clear: do not answer his calls. The process server would be in position. The timeline was precise. His flight was at 10:15. He would park, go to get his luggage, and find the photo. The server would approach immediately after. The sequence was automated now. There was nothing for me to do but wait in my clean, empty house for the confirmation that the trap had sprung. I felt a profound tiredness, but it was a clean tiredness. The kind that follows hard, purposeful work. The grief was there, a hollow space waiting to be filled, but for now it was overshadowed by the sheer fatigue of vigilance. The performance was over. The strategy was in its final, irreversible phase. I had deployed the weapon. Now I would let it find its target. I sat at the kitchen table as the morning stretched into late morning. The house was so clean it felt like a museum of a life that had already ended. My phone remained silent. I did not touch it. I watched the clock. His flight was at 10:15. He would have aimed to arrive by 9. The short-term parking, level 3, near the elevators. Diane's process server would be there. At 10:20, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Diane. Service confirmed at 9:52 a.m. Subject was served at vehicle in parking structure. Process executed per plan. A few minutes later, another text. Your subject attempted to make a phone call immediately after service. The process server observed this. The call did not connect. That meant he had tried to call me. I had not answered as instructed. I put the phone down. I pictured it because I had planned it, and because Diane's terse reports allowed me to reconstruct the scene with clinical accuracy. He would have driven to the airport, the radio playing, his mind on the first-class cabin, on Chloe waiting at the gate, on Paris. He would have parked in the short-term structure, taken his ticket, found a spot. He would have turned off the engine. He would have sat for a moment, a man on the brink of his new chapter. Then he would have opened his door to get out and retrieve his suitcase from the back seat. That is when he would have seen it. The photocopy placed squarely on the driver's seat. The image of our younger selves, smiling. He would have frozen. He would have picked it up. He would have turned it over and read the 2 words in my handwriting, Bon Voyage. And below that, the lawyer has the rest. His mind in that moment would have scrambled. How? When? The tickets. He would have thought of the tickets in the drawer. He would have felt a cold plunge of understanding. The ignorance he had assumed in me was a fiction. He had been observed, tracked, and outmaneuvered. He would have looked up, his head swiveling, searching the concrete cavern of the parking garage for a witness, for me. He would have seen only other travelers, families hauling bags, couples embracing hello or goodbye. None of them would have noticed the man standing frozen by his car door, holding a piece of paper that had just shattered his reality. That is when the process server would have approached. A man in casual dress, holding a legal envelope. The server would have confirmed his identity. Marcus Richardson. He would have nodded, dazed. You've been served. The server would have placed the envelope into his hands, or perhaps into the car if Marcus's hands were full with the photo. The envelope contained the petition for divorce and the proposed settlement agreement, drafted from the financial evidence I had provided. It would outline the division of assets, the claim on the house, the consequences of his hidden account. The server would have turned and walked away. His job was done. Marcus would have been left there, the photo in one hand, the legal envelope in the other. The hum of the airport around him, a place of journeys and transitions. His journey had just ended before it began. He would have looked at the boarding pass in his pocket, the one that matched the ticket next to Chloe in his wallet. Useless now. He could not get on that plane. The legal process had been initiated. He would have known that any movement, boarding a flight to another country in the midst of a divorce filing, would be catastrophic in court. He would have known I had planned this timing precisely to ground him. He would have tried to call me. The phone would have rung, unanswered, in the clean, quiet house where I sat. He would have tried to call Chloe, his voice likely strained, telling her something had come up, an emergency he couldn't go. She would have been confused, then angry, waiting at the gate. He would have had to explain, or more likely, lie again, creating a new layer of deception to cover the collapse of the old one. He would have had to get back in his car. He would have had to drive away from the airport, away from Paris, back toward the life he thought he was escaping, a life that was now legally and irrevocably being dismantled by his own actions. The photo would have sat on the passenger seat, our young faces a silent accusation for every mile of the drive home. My phone rang again. It was Diane. I answered. "It's done," she said. Her voice was professional but held a note of solid satisfaction. "Served without incident." My associate observed from a distance. He took the envelope, looked at the papers, and made a phone call. He appeared, in the associate's words, visibly shocked. He did not proceed toward the terminal. He got back in his car and has left the airport. "Thank you, Diane. The first legal step is complete. He now has 20 days to respond to the petition. Given the evidence, I expect his lawyer will advise him to negotiate. The proposed settlement is more than fair, considering the circumstances." "I understand." "Are you all right?" she asked. It was a practical question, not a sentimental one. "I am," I said, and I was. The cold clarity that had sustained me for 2 weeks was still there. The climax had occurred exactly as designed. The mechanism had worked. There was no shouting, no dramatic confrontation. Just a man in a parking garage receiving the consequences of his choices in 2 forms, a personal photograph and a legal envelope. The revenge was not in violence, but in the utter, seamless efficiency of it. He was now trapped in the legal and personal wreckage he had created, while I sat in a clean, quiet house, free of him. The trap had sprung. The hunt was over. After the call with Diane, I sat for a long time in the quiet kitchen. The silence was no longer charged. It was simply quiet. The mechanism had completed its cycle. There was nothing more to plan, to execute, to monitor. The energy that had sustained me dissipated, leaving a hollow but clean fatigue. I did not wait for him to come home. He would not come to this house, not that day. He would go to a hotel or perhaps to her. That was no longer my concern. I took a shower. I dressed in comfortable clothes. I left the house. I drove to a part of town I had always liked but rarely visited, a street with independent shops and a small coffee shop that had large windows overlooking a park. I went inside. The air smelled of roasted beans and baked pastries. I ordered a pot of herbal tea and took a seat at a small table by the window. The coffee shop was busy with a mid-morning crowd. Students typed on laptops. An older couple shared a scone. A woman read a book while her toddler played with blocks on the floor. It was a scene of ordinary life, moving forward. I was now an observer within it, no longer an actor in a strained performance. My phone buzzed on the table. It was Diane again. I answered. "He has retained counsel," she said. "His lawyer contacted my office. They are requesting a meeting to discuss the settlement. As expected, they want to negotiate." "What do you advise?" I asked, watching a sparrow land on the windowsill outside. "We meet. We present the financial evidence. We hold firm on the terms we drafted. The hidden account gives us significant leverage. He is in a weak position. I believe he will agree to the terms to avoid a protracted court battle that would expose his conduct further." "Proceed as you see fit," I said. "I trust your judgment." "I'll handle it. The goal is a swift, uncontested settlement. You should not have to see him. I will be your intermediary." "Thank you, Diane." "One more thing," she said, and for the first time, her voice softened slightly. "You executed this with remarkable precision. It is a rare thing to see someone take such clear-headed control. You should be proud." "I am not proud," I said honestly. I am relieved, and I am ready to be done with it. Understood. I will be in touch with updates. She ended the call. I placed the phone back on the table. I poured a cup of tea from the small pot. The steam rose, carrying a scent of chamomile and citrus. I took a sip. It was hot and soothing. From my bag, I took out a new journal, a simple notebook with a blank cover. I also took out my own tablet. I opened a browser. I navigated to a travel site. I had done research in the quiet hours of the past week, not as part of the plan, but as a separate, private project. I booked a one-way ticket, not to Paris, to Lisbon. The departure date was 1 month from today. I selected an aisle seat. I paid with my personal credit card, the one attached to the account I had opened separately after meeting with Diane. The confirmation email appeared in my inbox. I did not print it. I opened the journal to the first page. The blank lines awaited. I picked up my pen. I did not write about the past, about betrayal, about revenge. I wrote a list. It was a practical list. Learn basic Portuguese phrases. Research neighborhoods in Lisbon. Contact real estate agent about leasing the house. Sort attic boxes, keep, donate, discard. Cancel joint credit card. Change all passwords. The list was not an ending. It was a beginning. It was the blueprint for a life I would build alone, on my own terms. Each item was a small, manageable step forward. I looked up from the page. Sunlight streamed through the window, warming the wood of the table. The murmur of conversation and the hiss of the espresso machine were a gentle soundtrack. The sparrow on the windowsill pecked at a crumb, then flew away. I felt a sense of space opening up inside me, where before there had been only the cold, hard focus of the plan. The grief would come, I knew. In quiet moments, it would surface. But it would be my grief to manage, not a weapon for someone else to wield. The anger was spent, its energy converted into action and now into this quiet resolution. I finished my tea. I closed the journal. I placed it back in my bag. I left money on the table for the bill and a tip. I walked out of the coffee shop into the midday sun. I did not drive home immediately. I walked through the small park. I watched children play. I saw an elderly man feeding pigeons. The world continued, indifferent to my small drama. That indifference was a comfort. The best revenge was not a moment of confrontation in an airport garage. It was this. It was the ability to sit in a sunlit cafe, to make a list, to book a ticket to a city I had always wanted to see. It was reclaiming my own narrative, line by line, page by page. It was the quiet, unassailable fact of moving forward. I got into my car. I drove back to the house. It was still clean, still quiet. It was mine. For now, it was a base of operations. Soon, it would be an asset, a source of income, a chapter closed. I had the keys. I had the documents. I had the plan. I went to the home office. I took the plain cardboard box from the desk drawer. Inside were the spare car key and the leftover packing materials. I drove to a hardware store across town and dropped the key into a metal recycling bin. I disposed of the box in a public trash can. There was no evidence left, only the legal proceedings which were in Diane's capable hands and the fresh page of my journal. The story of Evelyn and Marcus was over. The story of Evelyn was just beginning. I turned the key in my front door, walked inside, and closed the door behind me. The silence welcomed me back. It was my silence now.